Okay, hi, good morning everyone. So we meet again in this course with the code FINCI 6209020 for subject quantitative analysis. So this is a two credit subjects, which is it is a full theory. And me as a lecturer, Shinta Amalina Havidz, which you usually call Shinta by you. And this is a finance program subjects under accounting department, School of Accounting, and this will be delivered in 2024 as this is a current subject that we are having in this semester. So before we move forward, even though this is in the middle sessions of the whole semesters, so I'd like to recall the course descriptions. This is a course designed to equip students with theory and practice of quantitative methods within the context of accounting and finance. This subject will cover a wide range of statistical topics such as the time value of money, which this topic we have discussed it many times for another courses before, and the statistical concepts and market returns, probability concepts, common probability distributions, sampling and estimations, hypothesis testing, correlations, and regressions. In addition, the advanced concepts in regressions, time series, machine learning, and big data projects are also explored. Upon completion of this course, the student will be able to apply statistical concept in accounting and finance research field and run the data with our studio. And we actually have 5 learning outcomes. We expect that the students able to complete this course by achieving 5 learning outcomes. The first one is explain the statistical concept and probability concepts. And then the second learning outcomes is applying the common probability distributions, the sampling and estimations. And then the third is applications about applying the hypothesis testing, linear regressions, multiple linear regressions, and I'm able to run the data using RStudio. And the fourth is apply the time series analysis, discussing about the multi-factor models and able to run the data again using RStudio. And then the last but not least is that explain the machine learning, big data projects, and market risk. This is actually a topic which you have known about the artificial intelligence. So actually, machine learning, big data projects are part of them. And then we move forward to strategy of these courses that we have class discussions. We can have a discussions in a group for the whole semesters. Of course, class presentations. Once we have, I provide the task, and then you may present your results. Individual and team assignments, and then this can be assigned through Binus Maya. And of course, lecture that I will deliver the material first. And of course, question and answer. You may raise your hand to ask during the sessions. Just do not hesitate. And then again, it will be delivered in full English because all finance courses are delivered in English. And this is also a hybrid meeting as we have a combined online and offline meeting. But make sure, because we have a limit, you as a student have limitations to attend in online meeting. Okay, so make sure your attendance fulfilled in these classes. And all materials can be accessed from New Binus Maya, our learning management system. There you can. And then this course, we use this textbook from Quantitative Investment Analysis by Richard DeFusco. And this is CFA, the book which published by CFA Institute. So because we have collaborations with CFA, so I hope by using these textbooks, it will ease you one day later if you want to take the CFA exam as well. So there are 13 topics, as this is a 2 credit, so we have 13 topics. The first is the statistical concepts, which organizing, visualizing, and describing the data, probability concepts, common probability distributions, sampling and estimations, hypothesis testing, and introductions to linear regressions, and we move forward with multiple regressions or multiple linear regression. Those are the same. And then move forward again with the multiple linear regression and its classic assumption test. And then time series analysis, which this is a very common data used by the financial researchers, financial analysts, and then multi-factor models, machine learning, big data projects, and the last but not least is measuring and managing market risk. So those are the topics, and this is the evaluations. We have 3 main evaluations from the assignment, mid-exam, and final exam with each weight for each measurement And this is the learning outcomes for assignment. We may have assignment from the entire learning outcomes, and it's from the very beginning to the end of the semester. While for the mid exam, you may focus on the first up to the third learning outcomes, and then for the final exam, the remaining three learning outcomes, the third to the fifth learning outcomes, which in total you have 100% of evaluations. And this is the assessment rubric, how we measure each student. So for all learning outcomes, from the first learning outcome until the fifth learning outcome, it is between 85 to 100 for excellent performance, and then 75 to 84 for good performance, and average for 65 to 74, and then the remaining is poor. But I hope you guys can perform at least good enough up to excellent. So this is the assessment rubric for the remaining learning outcomes for third, fourth, and fifth. So if do you have any questions, or we can move forward with the sessions today, which we are going to discuss about multiple regressions from session 7. If I tell about multiple linear regressions, this is from the third learning outcomes, which apply in the hypothesis testing, and this is today's sessions, linear regressions, multiple linear regressions, and at the end you should be able to run the data using the R Studio. So multiple linear regressions. Do you have any idea about multiple linear regressions or multiple regressions? The keyword is the multiple. So this is actually used by the investment analysts, financial analysts to hypothesize some variables that might impact to another variable. So we actually have two main variable of interest. Any one of you have idea? Vanessa, do you have Vanessa Andromeda? Do you have any idea about dependent variables?
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, dependent variable is the variable that you want to observe or explain, like that, miss.
Yes. Like the one that we want to observe, like we also call as a predicted variables, the variables that we want to predict which
Mm-mm.
factors might affect these dependent variables. Thank you, Vanessa, for the answers. This is the variables that will explain or will predict the dependent variables. So actually, if you can recall the hypothesis testing, and then that time you build the framework, so you can imagine that when you build the framework, the independent variables should be on the left side, and we are going to predict the dependent variables on the right side. So which factors that might affect the dependent variables? Okay, so multiple linear regressions allow us to determine effect of more than one independent variables on a particular dependent variable. So what is the difference? So these multiple linear regressions, actually, this is how the equation should be. Y stands for the dependent variables. B0 or alpha, we call it as the constant value, and B1 is the coefficient, and X1 is the first independent variables, followed by B2 as the second coefficient of the second independent variable. So actually, simply Y stands for the dependent variables, while X stands for the independent variables. And these independent variables, you may have 2 or 3, 4 or 5. The more independent variables you have, we expect to have a better results in the regressions, because you use many predictors to predict the predicted variables. While the E at the end of the equations, it stands for the error term, and N is the number of observations. Yes, Jonathan, Hari, Do you want to ask something?
Yes, Miss. I have a question, Miss.
Yes.
In this multiple linear regression model, is there any control variable that we can put in the model?
Sure. This is a very good question. Besides dependent variables, independent variables, this is our variable of interest. But there's also control variables that you might heard before. This is the variables that it may control the dependent variables other than the independent variables. So let's say if you want to predict Bitcoin prices, Bitcoin nowadays is usually as investment alternative, right? Alternative investment, especially for Gen Z. They want to invest in these digital assets. So we want to predict which factors that might affect these Bitcoin prices. So other than, let's say, stock prices, which another assets like government bonds, green stocks, or even the foreign exchange, we should also include, it is better to include the control variables to control that factors that might also have effect to the dependent variables. By including the control variables, we also expect to have a better results or a very significant result. So what may be the control variables of Bitcoin prices? We can simply use the market capitalizations of Bitcoin prices. We can also utilize the volume of the Bitcoin transaction. So usually these control variables can be used from the internal factors of those dependent variables. Do I answer your questions, Johar?
Okay. Yes, Miss. I think it's clear enough for me.
Okay, thank you, Johar, Jonathan Hari. Very nice question. So, if you happen to conduct a research one day later, it is very important to also consider the control variables instead of only focusing on the dependent and independent variables. Again, the larger the number of the observations, we also expect to have a better results. So we move forward. How can we analyze at the end of the day of these multiple linear regressions? We use software to estimate the multiple linear regressions. These courses we apply by using the RStudio, but another statistic tool. So we say this software, also known as statistic tools for finance students, finance researchers, financial analysts. They usually use data, e-views, RStudio. RStudio is the most recent statistic tools that widely used nowadays among financial researchers. Okay, so now there is this known as adjusted R squared. Beside independent variables are the variables that might predict the dependent variables or the predicted variables. So when data later, you will have this R square results. So do you have any idea about R square? Anyone here have any idea about R square? Fef, maybe?
Yeah, Miss. I think underscore is like a research indicator to see how good the independent variable can explain the dependent variable.
Yes, this is a very good answer. So, in a statistic or in economic terms, this is said as a goodness of fit. How good it is, how good the independent variables could explain the dependent variables. The closer number to one means that those independent variables could explain well the dependent variables. So we expect to have a higher number of, which is close to one of these R square. Actually, there are R square and adjusted R square. To me, I prefer to use the adjusted R square because it already adjusts all the conditions that might affect during that time, might consider the error as well. So when the value is 1, it indicates a perfect linear associations. But this is very hard, almost not happening. But let's say if you have the results 0.90, then it means 90% of the independent variables could explain the dependent variables. And this is a very good results because these independent variables could explain for 90%. So before we have discussed about the linear regressions, now we move forward to the violations of regressions assumptions. So this multiple linear regression, or in the finance area, we usually say it as ordinary least square or OLS. These are the same things. There should be some, the classic assumption test that should be fulfilled. But you may note this, if you have a big data, or your observations is larger than 100, which is this 100 is considered as a big data, you may ignore this classic assumption test. But it is also okay for you to consider this if you want to fulfill all these classic assumption tests. There are three main classic assumption tests. The first one is heteroscedasticity, serial correlations, and multicollinearity. We as a finance student, finance analyst, finance researcher, we always deal with heteroscedasticity and serial correlations. If you can recall types of data, their time series, cross-sections, panel data, finance area always deal with time series and panel data. When you work with time series, you should highly consider about the serial correlations. Because why? Let's say, let me recall about the Bitcoin prices. The Bitcoin price today might be affected by the price of previous day. So these might have a serial correlations. And then if we consider for a panel data, then we should fulfill the heteroscedasticity as well. Why panel data? Let's say we take stock indices in Asian countries that might affect the Bitcoin prices. So these Asian countries consider as many countries during the time period. So there will be a heteros problem because Asian countries are not homogeneous. So you should deal with this heteroscedasticity issue. But no worries, to deal with this heteroscedasticity and serial correlations is very easy to solve. So this is what I have explained about the heteroscedasticity in statistical terms. We assume that the error were homoscedastic. So we are expecting to have that our data are all homoscedastic. There is no heteroscedasticity issue. So how do we test for the heteroscedasticity? First, we can use Bruce-Pagan. This is one of the tests. There are so many tests for heteroscedasticity, but Bruce-Pagan test is widely used for heteroscedasticity, and Darwin-Watson for serial correlation test. But once you have issue, you run the data and then you have the results, and then you see, oh, there's error. There's issue on the heteroscedasticity and serial correlations. You simply just need to use the robust standard error to correct the error, to correct the issue of the heteroscedasticity and the serial correlations. So by using this robust standard error, it will simply solve your problems. Slide, please.
Sorry, Miss, can I ask about heteroscedasticity?
Sure. Yes, sure.
What will happen if we ignore heteroscedasticity?
When we ignore heteroscedasticity issue, then our regressions result will be biased. When the results are biased, then our results, again, they are not robust. It means that, you have the results, but it is actually not showing a good recommendations at the end of the session and at the end of the recommendations, because usually financial analysts have the data, they run the data, they want to provide investment recommendations, right? But if the results are not robust, which is there is a heteroscedasticity issue, then we cannot provide, you can provide recommendations, but that is not a good recommendations for, let's say, the investors. Does it answer my questions, your questions, like?
Yeah, Miss. Okay, thank you, Miss.
Okay, thank you. Very good question. So, there are many methodologies for heteroscedasticity, but if you happen to use multiple linear regressions or ordinary least square, you simply just need to use this robust standard error, or, unless, despite of using the ordinary least square, you may also consider the generalized least square. So this is another methodology. You may learn it one day later. So we move forward to multicollinearity. Before the heteroscedasticity and what was it? Serial correlations is talking about data, while multicollinearity is the problem among the independent variables. So multiple linear regressions, you have two or more independent variables. We should make sure that there are no correlations between the independent variables. If it is highly correlated among the independent, so I'm talking the independent variables, not the dependent, okay? So when you want to test the multicollinearity, you should exclude the dependent variables. So just include the independent variables on the multicollinearity test. If one or two variables are highly correlated, how to solve the issue, then you need to remove one of the independent variables. So this is how the solutions for each problem. So both heteroscedasticity and serial correlations, you may use robust standard error to correct the conditional heteroscedasticity as well as to correct the correlation, the serial correlations. While for the multicollinearity, you simply just need to remove one of the independent variables. But when you remove these one independent variables, mean you lost one predictors, right? So I highly suggest you consider another independent variables to predict the dependent variables, because again, the more variables of independent you have, we expect to have a better results, because there are more variables that could explain, that could predict the dependent variables. So I think this is enough from the class today. Is there any questions from the floor? Fevila, please.
Hey, Miss, I'm sorry, I would like to ask, other than the multiple linear regression, is there any possible regression model that frequently used by the financial analysts? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the questions, Fevila. Actually, in finance, the more methodology you know, the more methodology you can run in the software, the better, because you can know which, because we are dealing with many types of data. These data should have a suitable methodology. So let's say, what is another methodology that usually used by the financial analyst? We as a financial, again, analyst students, we usually to consider, because market, let's say stock market, let's just take about stock market. This stock market is very dynamic, right? You see, before, when COVID-19 happens, stock market crash. Is not only stock market, even cryptocurrency market also crashed that time, right? Means that times the economic conditions in a very bad conditions, right? And then once the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine come, and then the economy start to rebound, and then today we are on the post-pandemic era. So we can see in general, there are three economic conditions. Bad conditions, which is usually we call as bearish market, and then normal conditions, which is during, like, the economy start to be okay at the time. We call it a normal market. And then when the economy start to rebound again, the economy start to grow again, so we call it as a bullish market. So I guess you have heard it, this term bearish, normal, and bullish market. So if you want to consider these kind of situations, you may consider quantile regressions. Do I answer your questions, Fevila?
Yes, Miss. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the question. Is there any other questions from the floor? Nothing, no answer. So again, as usual, practice make better. So I'll give you assignment. This will be a group assignment. So please consider, find and collect 3 independent variables and 1 dependent variable. Again, in finance area, you should be able to know what are the variables in finance area. You may choose assets, financial assets to consider, and then you may provide the equations of the multiple linear regressions or the ordinary least square, and then please run the data and then discuss the R squared, the assumption test, and then you provide very simple recommendations. And then please do submit this assignment to Binus Maya. I have provided the group assignment there. Just submit, one of the member of the group can submit there. You have 3 times to submit, but the latest one will be the one that I will score. So is there any questions for the group assignment? Or is it clear enough? I guess it is clear enough. So don't forget again to fill the questionnaire about the subjects, the one that we have run during this semester, and then the link is available in the forum of these sessions. Once you fulfill this, once you fill these questionnaires, you may see your score for this subject, and then again, this slide have been adapted from Richard Defusco, Quantitative Investment Analysis, from chapter 8. And I guess this is the end of the slides. If there's no more questions, thank you so much for attending this class today. I hope this will be helpful for you guys later. This will be very helpful during your final year when you conduct your thesis. You may know independent and dependent variables, and you may also consider the control variables. And then you may increase your data. The larger the data you have, you may expect to have a better results, which means significant result. Yes, Stephen.
Miss, I would like to ask a question. You
Yes.
said that the bigger the data is the better, but what
Yes.
about like how can we determine the optimal number of independent variables to include in multiple linear regression model to make sure there's a balance between the accuracy and also the complexity of the research?
Okay, a very good questions. If independent variables, better to have 3 or more. Let's say 5. I may suggest you have 5. This is for your final year letter, okay? For your assignment, 2 to 3 independent variables are okay. 3 independent variables, I guess I put on the assignment. But for your final year, you may consider at least 5 independent variables, because the more predictors you have, you expect to have a better results of predicted variables results. And then, but make sure the more independent variables you have, this will not increase your N. This will not increase your observations. To increase these observations is that to have more data based on your period or time series, or you input more cross sections. Let's say you have more countries, then you have panel data. So do I answer your questions, Stephen?
Yes, Miss, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. If there's no more questions, thank you again for attending this class. Make sure you attend next sessions and see you on the next sessions. Good luck. See you. Bye-bye.